Welcome to the UIF Community Podcast. Before we get started, please keep in mind that this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions expressed are those of the individual presenters and do not necessarily reflect UIF Corporation or its affiliates.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Omar Subhani. On today's episode, we will review the book 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. The author, John Maxwell, has written multiple books on the topic of leadership and has sold millions of books worldwide. The premise of this book is simple. Leadership is not a trait we are born with, but a skill set that is developed over time. We're going to dive into this book a little later in the podcast, but let's start with some introductions. I'm your host, Omar Subhani, and as usual, we have Aijaz Hussain and Farah Zaitar with me. The three of us work at UIF Corporation, the number one faith-based financing company in the U.S. Aijaz and I work in senior management on the residential side, and Farah is a team lead in our auto financing group. Before we review some lessons from this book, I wanted Aijaz to share some of his experiences from a recent trip that he took to the Far East. Aijaz, do you want to share some of your travel experiences for the benefit of our listeners?
Yes, Omar. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Such a pleasure to be spending some more time with you on this podcast. And today we decided, before we go to the book, we'll sort of take a fun take here on travel, mainly because I was on vacation for the past 2 weeks, just got back last Sunday. And each year I take a cultural immersion trip to a new country that I've never visited before. And I usually try to spend 2 weeks really trying to understand the culture, spend some time with the locals, get to see what's going on. And it's a form of education and self-reflection for myself. So this trip I took, even though I've traveled extensively through a lot of the Western Europe, through India, through the Middle East, a lot of the US, even some parts of Africa, never have really been to the Far East. So this particular trip I took started off in Hong Kong for a couple of days and then went to Vietnam, mainly Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, and then off to Thailand, went to two cities, Bangkok and Phuket. So just want to share some of the experiences for those of you who maybe are looking to travel there at some point in time. And for those who've maybe already been there, maybe just my own experiences. So first and foremost, when I travel to these countries, one of the first things I find myself is just count my own blessings. Because when you get there, especially some of these less developed countries, you see what a struggle life is, right? And we can relate to some of our own experiences with our own home countries. Like I'm from Hyderabad in India, and a lot of these cities, both Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, reminded me a lot of Hyderabad. I've traveled there a few times, where the traffic patterns, the way everybody honking all the time, a little bit of the pollution, and just a nonstop go culture, just reminded me of that, if you will. So the city life, mostly, I would say, with both these cities, including Thailand, Bangkok, was just more busy, very frantic traffic. And the fun part was one time I went to go grab coffee, and I was trying to cross this coffee shop was across my hotel, and I went and I went there, but then coming back, the traffic had really escalated, and I just couldn't cross the road. So finally, I stopped one person, and in my Google Translate, I basically said, "Hey, can I pay you some money to help me cross the road?" Because it was almost impossible, because it was just nonstop two-way traffic. So he looked at me, smiled. He said, "No need to pay me, I'll just help you." So he basically grabbed my hand and helped me cross the street. So and the point I'm trying to illustrate is it's just crazy traffic to navigate for foreigners visiting the country. So, but city life was a typical city. But some other places I visited, like Halong Bay, it's a very beautiful, it's an overnight cruise you do by these beautiful, mountainous sites and the water and the rock formations, and similar with Mekong Delta. And then I also had the chance to hike through the mountains in Sapa, which is home to the Hmong community. It was all great experiences. The challenge I felt the biggest was the food. For Muslims who we eat halal food, it's a lot of the cuisine is very pork dominated. So even if you're getting like a vegetarian soup or a seafood, you have to always ask whether there's some sort of a pork stock mixed in or whatever. So that was a constant challenge. So I had to quickly find some other Indian and halal restaurants that I was able to visit. And then the times I wanted to try local cuisine, I just kept it to vegetarian options. With a lot of checking, had a lot of fresh fruit and so forth. So that will be a challenge, except in Phuket, which is a very big Muslim population there with masjids and restaurants. So there it was very easy to find halal food options. But food was definitely a challenge in other parts in Bangkok and in Vietnam and so forth. So the one sad part that I felt was when I went to Ho Chi Minh City, visited the war memorial and in the underground tunnels. This is where the war took place, and the U.S. in trying to fight communism was over there, obviously fighting, and just it was very, very sad to see the effects of poor foreign policy decisions politicians made back in the 60s. And not only did it lead to 100,000 plus, I don't know the exact number, of U.S. young kids being killed over there who had no business being there, but then the war, the ravages of the war that took place over there for local people, right? It was just clear to see that, and they had to dig tunnels in to fight, and just eventually it was the Agent Orange and the napalm bombings and stuff that killed. And even to this day, you see the effects of those chemical agents in population. And I asked one of the people on the tour, one of the guides, I said, do Vietnamese people hold the U.S. Responsible? And his answer was very, very nice. That listen, we've forgiven, we've moved on, can't hold on to the past. We come in peace, basically. So that was kind of sad to see, the effects of war and what's happening. And to a degree now we see that again. History repeating itself in what's happening in our own countries lately. So that was all in all a good trip, and I would encourage people to visit with the right expectations. For me, it was just more of a good learning experience. So all in all, good. And so Farah, Omar, did you guys have a particular trip story you want to share? Maybe your favorite destination, something that, and I've traveled a lot, so I could go on and on and on for different countries I've visited. But
Yeah, I do. I do. Fada, did you want to go first and answer that?
Of course, my favorite trip of all time would have to be actually Australia. I
Well, that's
went
a good one.
about 6 years ago to Australia, and I absolutely fell in love with Sydney. It was just a week-long trip. We decided to go with my mom because she wanted to get out of the country. So, of course, I chose the farthest destination I could find. It was a 24-hour flight, but I would recommend it to anybody. We did go in June, I believe, expecting it to be warm and, sunny and all that, to get there and realize their winter is during June.
Yeah,
It's
that's true.
a
Yeah, 'cause they're in the southern hemisphere, right? So I think a lot of us who live in the U.S. we take that for granted, right? That we think it's the same once you go to like South America or Australia in your case.
Exactly. So it was a little bit of shock, but their winter was like 60 degrees. Like that's their low point. So I was like, this is still summer for me coming from Chicago. So it did not affect it. But from seeing the opera house to walking the bridge to doing all of that stuff, it was just amazing.
How
I
was the
would
food there, Fada?
The food was actually delicious. My one of my favorite restaurants was actually similar to like their Navy Pier, on the docks, and the food was so fresh, and you can find food, halal food there, and I absolutely loved it. I made the mistake of my mom wanted to cross the bridge. I made the mistake of wearing heels that day, so I crossed
Well,
the whole entire Sydney Harbor Bridge wearing heels, and some random couple took a picture of me. So I'm somewhere in China, probably on a billboard. Uh, because I was like, okay. They asked for a picture. I'm like, sure. You guys can take whatever you guys want. all in all, I got to see kangaroos, koalas. They're not as nice as they seem.
I was gonna
Uh,
ask you, yeah, what was the wildlife like? As I heard kangaroos are extremely aggressive.
they're
So,
so aggressive. I was like we have this image where it's like, oh, they look friendly and all that. No, they're not friendly. Neither are the koalas, to be honest with
oh
you.
man.
But I would assume the people must have been very friendly, right? Most Australians I come across seem to be just very genuinely very friendly people.
They are actually. They were very nice, and I felt so safe in the city of Sydney. I was actually out at 2 a.m. Because I had to go to the drugstore, and it was just I felt safe. Like I walked outside, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's 2 o'clock in the morning.
By
Everybody's still
drugstore,
out.
I'm assuming it's a CVS or Walgreens type
Yes,
drugstore, right? So just to
yes,
clarify, okay, good.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
confirm.
Not nothing else, guys.
All right, just making sure.
Yeah. So, and it was
I don't
underground.
want our audience members jumping to any conclusions about you, Farah. That's why I want to clarify. So.
Yeah, so it was underground. It was pretty cool. People were very helpful. They did look at me a little bit weird because I didn't have a jacket on, but that's a given. In the middle of winter. Honestly, all in all, I wish I did extend my trip. At one point, you guys might have not met me because I almost applied to university over there, just
Mm,
because that's how much I fell in love with the culture,
definitely,
the
Oh,
food, and the
wow.
people.
definitely one of my bucket list items. Omar, what about you?
Yeah, so for me, probably most I would not say exotic, but favorite travel memory and place to go was Istanbul. So in Turkey, me and my wife went for our honeymoon, which was almost or just over 19 years ago now. So we're planning, inshallah, to go next year again for our 20th anniversary. So we're hoping to do that. But yeah, Istanbul was amazing. We were there for about 10 days, and I'm really into history. I have, I think I've mentioned before, I have a couple of history degrees, bachelor's and master's. So I spent a lot of time taking courses on like Greek and Roman history. So there's a ton of that there, including the Islamic history. So it was just awesome. We had a really great tour guide that took us around the city for a few hours, and got to see all these historical sites. So it's such a cool city just because all the rich history it has for like thousands of years, and all these different sites, and it's all kind of jumbled together, in Istanbul, so you can see all these different historical sites, and they're all like side by side. Right, you have the Hagia Sophia, which when we were there, they're actually renovating it. So they had this big tower like in the middle of the Hagia Sophia, which was a church before and was converted into a mosque, and then later it was made into a museum, and now it's a mosque again. So there's a whole debate about that, about how that building should be set up. But when we were there, they were literally uncovering kind of the old Christian, kind of mosaics and stuff that they had there. So you can see like these pictures of, I'm assuming like Mary and Jesus, and then you had the Islamic, paintings over it of Allah and Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? So you had like all this there in the same building, and then when you go out, you had like the aqueducts and all this other Roman stuff that they had built, thousands of years ago that were still like in amazing shape, right? So you get to see all this. And then, I was actually asking my wife like what some of her memories were, or her favorite memories on this trip, right? And she was mentioning we had this really nice lunch on the Bosphorus River. So that was really nice. And we saw like, the boats and everything going by. And, one thing that was interesting there was, that, for us Americans is a lot of walking, right? So you can pretty much walk everywhere. You don't need a car or a cab or anything really to get around. We did take a cab once, and it was extremely expensive. And at the time, both of us were like in, basically like in graduate school and finishing college and stuff. So we didn't have a lot of money. So we're just like, okay, we're gonna walk the rest of the way. And obviously, in Istanbul, everything is like pretty much halal and stuff like that. You don't have to worry like as a Muslim like in terms of food and things like that. But kebabs, all the food that they had there was just incredible. Like some of the most amazing Turkish cuisine. Obviously it doesn't do justice, when you have it here in the U.S. compared to eating there locally. But Hagia Sophia really stood out. The Grand Bazaar was awesome. You could definitely get lost in there. It's so confusing. It's like a maze going through the city or going through the bazaar. And then one really funny thing we had was we were just trying to get some Turkish T-shirts for our family members, and they were so expensive, and they were charging like they could tell, right? Like they knew that we're tourists and stuff like that. So we're trying to take advantage, and so we had to like really bargain hard with these guys to like get the prices down because they're almost charging like $40 like USD for a t-shirt. We're like, get out of here, guys! Like this is like such a ripoff just to get like a red t-shirt. So we had to haggle with them, but it was fun. Like we had a really great time there. Definitely would recommend going to visit Istanbul and other parts of Turkey. And my sister especially has gone to different parts like Konya and other parts of Turkey that are really amazing. So we're hoping to go there soon again, inshallah.
Yeah. So, but I actually took a 2 week cultural immersion trip, like I just did to Far East about a couple of years ago, and I agree with you. I thought Turkey was just, it's a very historic city, right? Istanbul, so the East meets the West kind of thing. But then I tell you one highlight that I would highly, highly recommend everybody is to go to Cappadocia. If you are going to go to Turkey, you are going to go to Istanbul, take a plane, it's a short plane because car and stuff will be about 8 hours, but if you take a quick plane ride, it's maybe half hour, an hour, whatever. But when you go to Cappadocia, the hot air balloon rides, they are actually run by the Turkish Airlines. Maybe one of the most beautiful things you're ever going to do in your life. I did that, especially they take you in a bus right before sunrise, and when the balloons go up, it has the most beautiful landscape of some sort of a white limestone or whatever that shines and glistens against the sunrise, in the morning at 5 a.m. And sometimes you can hear some adhan in the background and stuff. So it's really one of the most peaceful, one of the most beautiful things you're going to do. So I highly recommend that. I went to like 10 other cities too, so they're all good. The food to me, though, I will be honest with you, Umar, I struggle with that. I found everything, maybe my taste buds are messed up with the spicy food I usually, and then the diversity of food we have in the US. But I found the food a little bit lacking in terms of, flavor. My expectations just killed it for me because I went with very, very high expectations. Some meals are very good, but in general, I was struggling because the food just seemed a little bit blander. I've actually had a great Turkish food in the US, and I love Turkish food in general. But over there, I felt maybe the restaurant choices I went to, it was sometimes I felt the taste was a little lacking. So, Farah, did you ever go very quickly before we go to the book? Any thoughts
I
on that?
did. I actually went to Istanbul, and I'm actually going back in February because I'm buying my wedding dress from there. Because
Oh,
I
nice.
mean, yeah, I know, right? Why not get it from there when they can custom make it? I love the culture over there. It reminds me of my home country of Lebanon, so I love the culture over there. I did not have Omar's problem where they overcharged us because they spoke Arabic, some of them,
Yeah.
and
Well,
you
very
can
lucky of
haggle with
you.
them in Arabic. We went to the Blue Mosque. We walked around. I actually refused to take a taxi, so I never knew how much it cost. But it was just, it is a must see for everybody, at least to visit there once in their lifetime. And don't just go for 3-4 days. Like, you need at least 2 weeks to get from place to place to place. So that is my recommendation.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, like I forgot to mention like the Topkapi Palace. Like, there's so many places to go just in Istanbul. And we were there for 10 days, and we felt like it wasn't enough. So definitely agree with that.
I think the two industries that seem to be really happening over there. Just talking to people generally, is one, the hair transplant industry. It's become so big over there. I
For sure.
personally know 4 or 5 people who from the U.S. who've traveled out there to get hair transplants because the whole process may cost like $3,000 to $5,000 from what I've been told, and much cheaper than the U.S. And also the medical industry. I just ran into somebody. It was not even a Muslim, just a regular person at one of the business luncheons I attended, and they were talking about how they had gone to Turkey for 4 days to do a full medical scanning, testing, procedure. And the whole thing, they had a guide that went with them all over the place and took them from test to test, from head to toe, all the different scans, all the different checks, and they give you like a full report, like how your body is doing, so to speak. So that was very interesting, and maybe at some point in time, I may consider doing that as well, like a full medical, testing procedure like that. Thankfully, I don't need a hair transplant, so I'm good in that department. But I might consider with the medical testing option. So, all right, let's dive into the book, Omar. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good.
We talked, we always talk about how can we add value to our audience members here. A lot of them are younger, starting careers and moving forward. So we're trying to pick books that provide lessons in life that can maybe help them advance their own career and make them better in both their professional personal life. So this particular book that we chose on leadership, it's by one of my favorite authors on leadership. John Maxwell is his name. He's written like multiple books on the topic of leadership and personal growth, and I've personally read like 4 of them. So far, and he does a great job in very simple words, communicating the broader points, and he adds a lot of quotes in there, which I really love, to sort of emphasize some of the points. And in this particular book, the premise is, a lot of people, you know, nobody's a natural born leader. You have to work at it. And so it comes down to basically how can you become a good leader? And the book argues that if you follow and implement these 21 laws that the book talks about, then over time you can become a great leader yourself. Now, I'm not going to go into each law because 21 is a lot of laws to cover in a podcast, but I've taken I've kind of narrowed it down to 7 laws of leadership, and I've sort of some of these other 21 sort of can be combined into one of these. So I'm gonna start over there. The first law it talks about is law of navigation, and it starts with a quote saying, anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. And leaders must have a clear vision. So where it's going really is that leaders must have a very clear vision of where the team is going and a plan to get there. So, because when challenges happen, anyone can take the helm and guide a team in the short run, but only true leaders can navigate businesses through changing economic cycles and obstacles that present themselves unexpectedly. So it's all about, the first law is all about a true leader inspires people, basically sets the course, and then works with the team to come up with a game plan so they can achieve that goal. So that's sort of the first law of navigation. Farah, Umar, do you have any leaders that come to mind who you think would are a good example of this, setting up this law of navigation? Farah, why don't you go for that? Any thoughts?
The first leader that comes to mind when you ask this question is Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, which is now everybody has an Apple phone or an Apple product. What attracts me to him, like why I think of him, is because of how he makes decisions, his details, the fact that his wardrobe is all the same. He likes that black turtleneck. With some khakis. He was able to, whenever the iPhone came out or any Apple product that came out, the way that he talked, because I used to always watch for the drops. So he had his own standards. I remember, I'm trying to recall where I actually read it, where when they were developing the new iPhones, all the time they would bring to Steve the phone and he would try to go through it. And if it wasn't easy enough for him, he'd send it back to his developers and be like, no. He always thought about the client. He always thought about who's going to purchase it. So he's one of the main people that always comes to mind whenever I think of a good leader.
I think personally, if you have not read his autobiography by Walter Isaacson, I think it is maybe the best autobiography. It's pretty long. I don't remember 700 pages, but I started reading it. I couldn't put it down. I think that was probably the fastest book I read in a matter of like 3.5, 4 days. 2 things that really stuck out to me about Steve Jobs, and I agree with you, is number one, his Think Different campaign, right? It's about creativity. You can't be successful if you do what everybody else does. So you got to think different. And in that book, one of the quotes he tells his underlings is, people don't know what they want until we show them what they want. And this is where the iPods, the AirPods, the iPad, and the iPhone, I mean, literally he thought about things that human beings did not think about, and that's what makes Apple the most valuable company in the world today. So Omar, what about you? Do any leader comes to mind?
Yeah, so you guys know I'm a Florida boy, so I grew up in Florida, visited Disney a ton, and Walt Disney came to mind, Aijaz, when you asked us that question, just in terms of what the company has stood for all these decades and the quality that they bring. And that was a big reflection of the founder of the company, Walt Disney, and just infusing kind of this magical charm into everything that they do. Disney, like I take my family a lot, especially my kids, Disney World, Disneyland, both Florida and California. And it's just like you stay at the resorts, you go to their theme parks. There's a level of quality detail that goes into every little thing that they do, right? And we have some of our team members at UIF who've worked previously at Disney, and you can tell they're different, right? Like they're different people. Like the way that they provide service to customers, how they take care of people, attention to detail, all of that. That's all part of the Disney brand, and that stems from from Walt Disney himself, in my mind, and and seeing how he built the company. And it was, like I said, infused with this kind of magical charm and everything that they wanted to do in their movies, their theme parks, and all the other stuff. Their whole branding is, coming from that. So to me, he's one of those kind of inspirational transitional figures in American business history that really stands out.
Yeah, actually, Umar, in the book, that's the example he did use. The author did use Walt Disney as the example, and it's coincident you picked the same thing. When you go to Disney, and when we had kids were little, we had taken them to Disney World, and I was just blown away. It starts with where dreams come true. And they're in the business of selling dreams, right? Making people's dreams come true, if you will. So to me, two things that really stick out about Walt Disney and the whole Disney World experience really is the creativity, like how they've been able to take characters and then make them into like real life personalities. And on top of that, it's the service. I mean, the service level of how they coach, teach, train the employees, and it's just fascinating. I'll give you a little example. Like I was standing around while my daughters and wife were on a ride or something, and I saw this guard, security guard. He literally walked up to a mother and daughter. A little girl was in a princess outfit, one of the Cinderella princess outfits or whatever, and he walked up and said something to the mom, and then they shook heads, and then he takes a little pad and he has this little girl like sign something. So later, when they moved away, I asked him, I said, what happened? He goes, oh, you know what? I just thought it'd be fun to go as the little princess for an autograph, and she willingly signed that autograph on that pad. I mean, just think about that, right? Like little girl was so happy signing that little her autograph like a princess on this little pad he had, and it was just such a cute moment, just to make the girl happy and the mom happy and so forth. You'll never forget those experiences. So I agree with you, Omar. I think it's a great both you and Farah. I think examples of great leaders over there. So I'm going to jump to the second law of leadership. The book talks about law of connection, and this particular law has to do with quote that summarizes it as leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. And goes without saying, you have to really connect with the people. If you can't connect with them, they're not going to follow you. So people buy into the leader first, then they buy into the vision, and trust is the foundation of any relationship. So it really comes down to empathy. Leaders have to have empathy. There was a time back in the day, 20, 30, 40 years ago, Wall Street culture, greed is good. It was about berating and trying to get more out of people, and empathy was sorely lacking. But I think over time, businesses, leaders, and have realized that empathy for each other, for their direct reports, for everyone in the company is so important. And I know UIF, we really talk about empathy a lot because we really foster that, about being do good, be good culture that we talk about all the time. Another thing they talk about is leaders have to sacrifice. Leaders must give up to go up. So that the empathy, the sacrifice, those are very, very important. I'm going to dive into the third law, which is about the law of addition, which is having to do about leaders add value by serving others. It's about giving back and paying it forward. You train others, you coach others, prepare next generation of leadership. And this quote really stood out to me in this law of addition. It says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I mean, look at the wisdom in that, right? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's very, very powerful. And so when we add value to others, we make ourselves more valuable to them. So, and I'm going to end with another quote in that chapter. It says, plant a tree under which you know that you will never sit. So what are leaders doing, right? They're planting trees for the future where you know you will not be there most likely. So plant a tree, under which you know you will never sit. So that was a great point. So any comments either one of you have on either the law of connection or law of addition?
No, I'm good on my end.
The next law was the law of magnetism, which is which is about who you are, the type of people you attract. So effective leaders are always on the lookout for good people. They have a list of qualities in mind, what they want in new people. And this is something, Umar, you and I, we talk about when we are recruiting for people to join our team. The process we take it how seriously at UIF here. I probably get about 250 resumes each year. We probably interview about maybe 15 to 20 people throughout the year, maybe hire 4 or 5 of them, because we're very selective, because we know the type of people we want, people who we feel can care for our customers, people who have that entrepreneur personality. They don't need to be guided, motivated all the time. So, and then at the end of the day, we're also looking for people who we feel have that empathy, can provide the service and the intelligence level and so forth. So this law of magnetism comes into play where leaders become very good at identifying the people that they want on the team. The next law was about the law of priority, which is something that I think most people struggle with, where most people have a manager mentality, right? They get dragged into many things. And the law of priority is basically saying that leadership is not about doing more, it's about doing more of what matters most. Put things first. Put first things first. This is one of the in the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey, the author, one of the habits of highly effective people, he talks about put first things first, meaning learn to prioritize. If you don't do that well, you don't time manage well, you get dragged into many different things and you get distracted and nothing gets done. So basically, great leaders are focused. They're very focused. They don't go down every rabbit hole, and they work mostly in the quadrant, which is things that are important but not urgent. This is again, I'm pulling some stuff from other books I've read here, which is in Seven Habits of Highly Effective People book, where they say people are all over the place. But you have to work in the quadrant of life where you're working on important things but not urgent. Because if you're always working on urgent things, you're always putting out fires. You'll never be successful over time. So that's the law of priority. Anything, guys, on you want to add on magnetism law or law of priority?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna. Then the next law is the law of process. Leadership isn't a destiny; it's a journey. We talk about that. True leadership is cultivated over time. There are no shortcuts. You have to work at it on a daily basis. You must invest in learning and growing. Leaders learn from their mistakes and then make inspiring, sound decisions. So. Also, as part of that, the law of process, you must self-reflect and be disciplined. You need to keep repeating the process. It's like working out. One long workout will not make you healthy, but working out consistently will make you healthy over time. So the law of process has to do a lot about just, you have to invest in yourself. You have to learn. You have to grow from each experience and so forth. And the last law I'm going to talk about is the law of legacy, which talks about, basically, what do you want people saying at your own funeral? And this is something I think we all have to ask that question. When we die, the day we die, what do you want people saying about you? Imagine family members standing around you. This again is from, in the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. The author starts his book by saying, you walk in and you realize your body is the one sitting at this funeral home or masjid, whatever, and then people around them are talking about you. So what are your friends saying about you? What are your family members saying about you? What are your work colleagues saying about you? What are other people saying about you who you interact with? So and if they're saying good things, that means that you've led a very good life. I had heard a story actually, and I don't want to say whether it's a hadith or not because I don't know for sure, but I heard a story when I was very young. It kind of stayed with me about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. To my best recollection, the Prophet Muhammad is walking with some of his disciples, and they run by this, they walk by this one funeral procession, and the Prophet looks and says, this man's going to go to heaven. And then a little bit down the road, they're walking and they run into another funeral procession. And he looks at the group and he says, "This man is going to go to hell." So suppose one of his followers says, "Well, prophet of God, how can you say that?" By just visually, looking at the funeral processions. And the answer was that, with the first procession where I said the man's going to go to heaven, people in the procession were speaking very highly of him and saying what a loss to humanity. This person has moved on, and what a wonderful man he was, and talking about all the positive traits and the impact he made. So I could tell that what he did and the legacy he left behind will take him to heaven. And on a similar vein, the other person, what I said, the person will be going to hell. There's nobody, a small group, nobody saying much. Even those who were talking didn't have much good things to say. And it's clear that if you didn't leave a lasting impact in this life here, chances are you're probably not going to go to hell. So that, for some reason, that really stayed with me, about what do we want to leave behind when we pass away, and that's the law of legacy, and we have to leave a lasting impact. So I thought that was something that I wanted to add from my own personal experience. So any thoughts on that, Omar Farah, on the last
Yeah,
couple?
just I was able to get a digital copy of the book, right? So I was going through it, and the law of navigation, like you mentioned, I think leaders are a little bit different than just regular employees in the sense that, like he's mentioning here, that they can chart a course, right? He links it to navigation, right, in the sense that they can see things up ahead down the road that others just don't see, right? There's a vision, a purpose behind what everybody is doing, as part of the organization or the company, and that resonated quite a bit with me because someone who's in a leadership position and now and recently, you have to think differently, and it's a process to be able to look ahead and see where do we got to go right from here. We're in a certain position right now. Whether you're starting off a company or you're in the middle of a process and you have a journey you want to go on, that's part of being a great leader, is being able to see things that everybody else doesn't really see right now. And sometimes they think you're crazy. And I remember this, Aijaz, when you first hired me, you had written on your board in your office, right, that UIF is #1 Islamic financing company in 2015. I remember that you writing that. And if someone had told you that back then, 10 years ago, they're like, "Oh man, this guy's crazy," right? But you have to see that, right? Like you have to, where are we going, right? That's kind of what a leader is supposed to be doing, is charting that course, is what he's talking about here. The other one was the law of solid ground, where he talks about how trust is the foundation of leadership, and that's something as well that there's a whole, like you mentioned about Wall Street culture, and I think unfortunately that kind of gets more attention than as part of being a good leader, is having trust of the people around you, that they know you're going to do good for them, right? And you're not going to screw them over, you're not going to hurt them or anything like that. But part of that is telling the truth to your subordinates or whoever you're working on, your team members. And sometimes the truth hurts, right? And that's what he talks about there. Now, those two really stuck out to me in terms of going over this book, and I hope that resonates with our listeners. That part of the process of being a leader is sometimes you have to say the blunt truth to people that, hey, you're not doing enough, right? Or you're not doing good enough, or you're doing this wrong or this incorrectly, etc. And the way you say it, how you say it also matters, right? How you speak to people, but to get that message across that either something needs to change, something has to improve, and those are uncomfortable conversations, but that's how we grow as a company, as an organization. And that is part of leadership. You can't sugarcoat things sometimes. It just has to be said. So those are things.
Yeah, no, I agree. And personally, I feel, UIF is blessed to have very many good leaders, and it's a privilege, and I'm proud to work with them. But in my humble opinion, most companies, they don't have true leaders. They have managers who may be effective in doing certain things, but they're not true leaders. Because we deal with a competitor all the time, in the field, and all they believe is to badmouth, slam, bash, other competitors, businesses in industry, and they find great happiness and joy out of that because they can't compete on pricing on service. And in the end of the day, their management sets a course that the way you succeed in the business is by attacking people, attacking your competitors, right? And to us as a company, we've never seen that as the right way to go about life. And we've always said, hey, well, how can we give back to the community? How can we be better as a company, as teammates, as employees? And I think that's all very, very important. So true leadership, again, it's a product of knowledge, growth, experience, and so forth. I want to end actually with this with a couple of experiences I had. One yesterday in Chicago. I belong to this business executives group, and it's senior executives from various companies. It's a networking group, and yesterday they had their annual dinner where they award prior to the International Businessman or Woman of the Year, and at the luncheon yesterday it was Satya Nadella, who's the current Microsoft CEO. Some of you may have heard of his name. Fun fact is Satya is from Hyderabad, India as well, and as a matter of fact went to the same school I went to for my sixth, seventh, eighth grade. He was a couple of years ahead of me, but a lot of CEOs, current CEOs, have come out of Hyderabad Public School. Shout out to the school over there. And Satya obviously has led Microsoft from a company that almost could have gone to irrelevancy, just being on Windows and Office, into cloud, and now maybe top three most valuable companies in the world. And he talked a lot about AI and so forth at the luncheon. But then what the moderator asked, Satya, you've been a CEO for the last 12 years, I believe. What are some leadership qualities you value? And he came and said, for me, I value three things in a leader. And he said, number one is clarity. You must have a very clear vision of where you need the company to go. Second, he said you need to create energy, because if there's no energy, the leader can't create that energy. The company will fall flat. And lastly, he said, we look to hire all-weather performers because conditions are always changing. Market dynamics are always changing. So if you have the right leaders who are all-weather performers, they always find ways to solve problems. So it was kind of nice to hear from him about what he values. Now, my own personal observations, reading like probably 15 to 20 books on leadership and personal growth, and my own personal experience. I've been in management for easily over the last 30 years, and what I feel like some of these traits that I feel are very important are, number one, gratitude. I think being thankful. If you're thankful, you're humble as well, because when you are thankful, you realize how much you're blessed with, and a good leader has to feel thankful for what he or she has achieved. And when you feel gratitude, you can also give back. Empathy, talked about that already. That's very, very important. Intelligence, I think, is extremely important. Obviously, you need to be able to understand, process things very fast. Integrity. If you don't have integrity, I don't think at the end of the day anything matters, because people will not trust you, people will not respect you. So obviously, integrity is very important. Fairness. I always tell our teammates, fairness. Treat people fairly. You don't have to treat them equally, but you have to treat them fairly, and that there's a difference in that as well. Somebody who's been with the company for 10 years, who's a top producer, who goes above and beyond to help the company, you treat them fairly, but it can be equal to somebody who just started, a few months ago or 1 year ago, doesn't do the amount of business and so forth. But you have to be fair. So you treat people fairly, but it doesn't have to be equally. Work hard and set an example. I mean, that's extremely important. You roll up your sleeves as a leader, you get out in the field. And I've practiced that, over the years, hundreds in presentation, maybe over 1,000, getting out in the field, working at Jumas, passing out cards, etc. If you don't do that, then you don't set a good example. And lastly, I feel like leaders have to have sound judgment, have that intuition. So if somebody keeps making mistakes and blames other people, or it's luck, oh, I've been unlucky, they're never going to be. That always will follow them. That's why it's very important to pick people who have sound judgment and who can play a big role. So that really is it, team. I think we've covered a lot on leadership over here. Somar, why don't you take and do the wrap? And if you guys have any comments, go ahead and wrap it up. And I'm done with my side.
I'm good on my end. Fada, any closing comments before we wrap up today?
The quote that comes to mind when you guys were speaking is, do good, be good. And that's one of the philosophies that I go by, whether it's in personal or in business, because you never want to leave a bad impression. So when Aijaz was talking about Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Prophet Muhammad, that's what came to mind about the funerals. The people that do good, be good. I've never left a job, alhamdulillah, that I don't have good rapport with, that won't rehire me. Just because I never want to break that connection. I never want to be mean, bad to anybody. So being fair and all that stuff. That's all I had to say, guys.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Farah. And thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of the UIF Community Podcast. We really hope you found today's discussion insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this podcast with others in your community. Please check out our website at myuif.com for more info on our Islamic financing and savings accounts programs. Until next time, this is Omar Subhani signing off. Salam and take care.